Hello, and welcome along to our stream today here on the Chocolatey Software Twitch channel and also on our YouTube channel. My name is Gary Ewan Park, and I am the senior or one of the senior software engineers here at Chocolatey. I've been at Chocolatey for coming up on 5 years now, working on it full time. And today we are going to be talking about the latest release of the Chocolatey Central Management product, which we shipped as 0.10.0. And today, in the absence of Paul, because you'll notice that Paul's not here normally, he's normally doing our streams, we have got Steph to fill in his place to also talk about CCM. So I'm going to let Steph introduce herself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Steph. I'm also one of the senior software engineers here, and I just celebrated my 4-year anniversary with Chocolatey a couple days ago, so that's awesome. Yeah, and look forward to showing you CCM.
Thank you very much. So the format of today is I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, or share at least a portion of the screen. So let me just find that. That's this one. So hopefully you'll all be able to see it's a virtual machine that I have created that has the latest Chocolatey Central Management bits on it. And the intention of today is we are going to run through the various items that are on the release notes, and where we can, we're going to demo them to you as well. But if you've got any questions, feel free to reach out on the chat. There's a few of my other Chocolatey colleagues in the chat who will be able to hopefully answer any questions. And if there's anything that we can discuss on the stream, feel free to signal those up so that we can talk about them live on the stream as well. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and jump in. So starting at the top, one of the features that we've added into this, or actually, before we go into that, one of the things about this release that we were really all quite excited about was in the previous couple of releases of Chocolatey Central Management has really been about updating the kind of base infrastructure framework version that we're targeting for Chocolatey Central Management. So that's been getting it from .NET 4.6.1 up to .NET Core App 3.1, and then up to .NET 6, etc. So this release was a really exciting release for us because we actually got to tackle some of the high-level feature requests that we've had on Chocolatey Central Management for a while now. So it was really quite exciting from that point of view to step into those bits of the code that we haven't looked at in a while, and get them available, folks. So one of the first ones there was the concept of adding recurring deployments. So this has been a feature request that our support team have been fielding for quite a while. So what this is all about is, if I go over to here, this is Chocolatey Central Management, the latest 0.10.0 release. So if I go into deployments and I go and create a new one, so historically, what you've been able to do within CCM is that you can create a deployment. So I'm going to go and add a step to this deployment. And in that step, you can specify, or you could always specify what you wanted to do. So in this case, let's just say I wanted to do an upgrade of the BG info package. What I could do is say, I could say what I wanted to do, and I could say where I wanted to do it. So in this case, I'm just going to say this computer. So I can go ahead and save that step down. And historically, I was able to create a scheduled deployment. And what that would mean was, at some point in the future, I could say, well, this is when I want that deployment to start. And that's where it ended. That's all you could do, in the sense that you could say what you wanted to do, where you wanted to do it, and when you wanted to do it. But the thing that we've added in this release of Chocolatey Central Management is, at what frequency do you want this to repeat? Because what we heard from folks was that we want to do the same task at the same time every Friday, right? So what that meant was they could go through this process and they would do that, be able to do that for the first one, but then they would have to recreate the deployment for the next week. So it was a little bit of an arduous task. There was the concept of being able to script out the creation of that deployment through either directly through the API that CCM has, or using the Choco CCM PowerShell module, you could begin to automatically create those deployments. But what we've got now is that you can specify, well, I want this schedule or this scheduled deployment, I want it to recur on a weekly basis, a bi-weekly basis, a monthly basis, a yearly basis. So what that looks like, if I go ahead and hit save here, actually, before we do that, let's give it a title so we'll be able to see it. So example recurring deployment. We'll go ahead and save that, and then we'll come back to the deployments page. So the way that that is rendered on the screen, it's slightly different. So when I move this one to ready, we'll say yes, we're ready to move it into the ready state. It's slightly different on the UI in the sense that there's now this calendar icon that indicates that that's a repeating deployment. So what will happen is at 16:35, which is a UTC time, and my VM here is in Pacific time zone, hence why there's a difference there. At 16:35 UTC, this deployment would kick off, and what would happen is that it would create essentially a duplicate of itself, and it would be scheduled for a week ahead of the time. Now, I can simulate that rather than waiting for that to happen by going over to the Actions menu here and just saying Run Now. So when I do that, I'm essentially overriding the scheduled start time, so that an instance of this deployment will start immediately, which is what's happened here. But it's created another one for a week's time. So that's a 13th of October, which is exactly 7 days from the scheduled start time of this deployment here. So even though I started it early, the follow-up deployment that was created was based on the scheduled start time. And I can kind of show that in action by if I kind of circumvent the start time of that one, then it's going to go out to the 20th of October, because it's always, again, the 7 weeks from the scheduled start time of the deployment, not when it actually started. So that's an exciting one. Like I say, it's something that we've heard from the support folks that a lot of our customers have been interested in having. So hopefully that's going to be useful. It is just the first iteration of the recurring deployments. There are some ideas internally about how we can maybe extend it further, but we're happy to hear feedback on what we've shipped and whether it's useful for you. Okay, so going back to the release notes, what we've got is add the ability to duplicate an existing deployment. So I've kind of already shown that in action, in the sense that when we create the follow-up recurring deployment, we are actually creating a duplicate. But what we heard from folks was, we've just gone to this, we've gone through the process of creating a deployment, we've added lots of steps to it, we've figured out all the groups, we've figured out all the bits and pieces of when we want things to happen. And then if I want to do that deployment again, I need to go through that entire process again. So now with recurring deployments, you don't have to do that, because you can schedule it out on a weekly basis, monthly basis, etc. But if there is just a random deployment that you wanted to get a duplicate of, you can now get that through the Actions menu here. So in this scenario, I'm going to create a duplicate of my example recurring deployment. So if I go ahead and duplicate that, what's going to happen is it's going to take me to the edit page, and it's going to remember all the settings and all the steps that I had configured. And it's going to create me a copy. So the title of this deployment has been named Example Recurring Deployment. And it's got the copy, same sort of nomenclature that you would have, or you would see if you copied a file on the file system. It adds a 1 and a 2 at the end as you're creating the duplicate. So here we're saying, well, this was a copy and it was created on this day. The only thing that we don't copy onto this new deployment is the scheduled nature. So we sort of assume that you're creating a duplicate, but you don't want the exact same schedule to be in play, but everything else will be copied through. So all the settings of the steps themselves, the groups, associations, all that sort of stuff will be copied through, but the schedule, you would need to add that back in, because we don't want to take a guess and get it wrong. So that's the one part that you will need to do. From the deployment page, you can essentially duplicate at any level. So whether a deployment is in draft, whether it's in the ready state, whether it's completed, the action menu always has the duplication option. And it is also actually a individual feature as well, in the sense that you can apply a permission to it. So if I go into roles here and look at who I'm currently logged in as, which is the CCM admin user with the CCM admin role, I'll see that the ability to duplicate a deployment is a feature that or a permission rather, that I have enabled for that role. So if you didn't want certain people within your CCM instance to be able to duplicate a deployment, you can absolutely turn that off, and that button will no longer be there. Okay. The next one on the list is retention policies. Automatically delete a computer that hasn't reported in for a configurable period of time. So again, this was a long sought after support request, and it's something that you could do through, again, ChocoCCM and using the API, but we've made it built into CCM now. And that is configured through the administration system. So if I click on settings here, there's a new tab in the settings, which is stale computer deletion. So it works in a very similar way to the audit retention that we added in a previous version of ChocoCCM, sorry, not ChocoCCM, in an earlier version of CCM, which was the ability to automatically roll over the audit log retention that was being kept in the database. So it's the exact same system, but this time it is for stale computer deletion. And the way that works is, if I were to enable this, because it's not enabled by default, what will happen is that every 365 days, by default, it will look for, amount of time in days. So it will look for computers by default that haven't reported into CCM in the last 365 days. And if it finds one of those computers, it will automatically delete it from the system. So you can obviously tailor that to how you want it. So whether it's a computer that hasn't reported in 30 days, it hasn't reported in 2 months, however long that period you want it to be, then we will maintain a look at, we will keep looking periodically for computers that are in that state. And if we find one, we will delete it. Okay. Now, the important thing here, and that's what the note here is that if you are making a change to that setting, if you're enabling it or you're changing the value, you will need to restart the web application that is CCM in order for it to take place, to start doing it. Now, there's that's a simple case of just restarting the web application within IIS, but there is documentation on the website that will help in how you can do that if you need to figure that out. So that's that one. The next one is the implementation of a light and dark mode. Now I'm going to hand over to Steph to tell you all about this one, because although I try and take credit for it, it was not me that did this in CCM. So I'm still going to drive, but I'm going to pass over to Steph to tell us all about it.
Yeah, so dark and light mode. Dark mode has been something that has been requested a few times, and over the last year or so, we've implemented it all on Chocolatey's websites, and now it is in CCM. So Gary, if you go up to that little sun icon right there, yep, and then there is a drop down here for dark and light, and you can just select the dark mode, and then it switches it to dark mode everywhere. And the nice thing about this also is that it is per user basis. So each user can have their own setting, however they prefer to view it. Yeah, it looks really nice. It looks really similar to all of our other Chocolatey websites. So hopefully it's a similar experience throughout, navigating through our products. So yeah, if you just want to kind of click around a little bit and
I was just reading a comment from Stevie on the chat there. Can you minimize the window a bit as your video covers? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I see what you're saying. So what Stevie's saying is that because of where our video is, they weren't able to see where the button was. So the button that I clicked was this button here at the top right, up beside the CCM admin, in my case, the logged in user. So by clicking on that, you then got the option of both light and dark. So I click on the light one in this case, it'll flip back to the light mode. And then I could also go back to the dark mode. So that's where it is. And apologies for it being hidden there by the Zoom icon. Thanks for that, Stevie. I'm going to go and maximize my screen again and let Steph continue. And I'll click around a bit.
Yeah, you just, click through a couple pages so you can just see the different areas. Yeah. So I hope everybody enjoys dark mode. I know that's something that, it's been requested a lot, and, we have it all of our other areas, so it made sense to bring it to CCM also.
Absolutely. So like I say, on the page that we're looking at before, so this is just our documentation site. As you say, we've got the light and dark mode available here as well. So there's we're just trying to make things as consistent as possible between our different ventures. So whether it's the public facing websites or whether it's CCM. Yeah, so perfect. Thank you very much. So going back to API, going back to the features here, we added a change to the API, which means there's now a way to query the license machine count. So what I mean by that is, if I go to the API section here of the site, what we'll see in here is there's a new API endpoint that can tell us information about the Chocolatey license information. So for example, if I were to drill down into this one, for those that are not familiar with this one, this is just a Swagger endpoint. This is the Swagger UI endpoint for our API that allows you to basically take it for a spin and find out the information that's available. So in this scenario, I'm just executing that command, and it's a little hard to see, but essentially what that's come back with in that result property there is the information about the current node count that I have on the license that CCM is aware of. So in this case, I've got 100 nodes available. So that's what is reflected in the top of the screen here. So that new API endpoint includes things for how many nodes you're allowed, whether it's a trial license, whether it's a valid, etc. So if you had another part of a system that needs, or another automation within your environment needs to know that information, we're now exposing that through the API. So that's what that was. So going back to the release notes, there's a few bug fixes. So I'm going to kind of rattle through those because there's not a whole lot to necessarily demonstrate about it, but I'll rattle through them and then we'll get to some of the improvements. Someone's made a point that dark mode in the Swagger API documentation would be useful. Maybe. That Swagger UI is something that we utilize from the open source Swagger project. So whether it has a dark mode or not, I don't know. That's maybe something that we can take a look at, but there is not a dark mode in the Swagger UI for the API in this release. It is just for the main portion of the CCM website. So bug fixes. The first one there is auditing data may be lost in the database when some entries are updated. So what this one was referring to is, or what this one is referring to, is that there was a scenario in the database where we capture a lot of audit data on the different entities that are being updated. So when a computer got created, when a computer first reported into the system, when a computer was updated, when a computer was deleted. But what we found was there was a scenario where the created date time of a computer could actually be overwritten with the last edited time or the last updated time of the computer. So we put a fix in place for stopping that from happening going forward. But there's little to nothing that we could do in terms of putting that data back to when it actually happened. So we can't fix it in the sense that we can't replace the data that's been overwritten, but we can prevent it from happening again. Okay, so apologies about that. It was found as a result of the testing and stuff that we were going through for this release, but it has been fixed, and that overwriting of that data won't happen going forward. The next one here, exception when retrieving a deployment from the get deployment plan for view method. This one was with regard to if you're calling that API endpoint, the get deployment plan for view, and there's reason to do that because, again, you might be using Choco CCM or you might be calling the API directly. It would error out, and it would error out because it wasn't able to deserialize that object correctly. So to get into the technicalities a little bit, the result of that API call is JSON data, so structured JavaScript object notation. It was basically going round and round a little loop because of the deserialization of the computer object, which potentially contained a group object, which potentially contained other computer objects. It was going round in circles and it was getting confused. So we made it so that recursion of that object didn't happen anymore, and that get deployment plan for view method is now working. Okay. The creation time on the notifications table was incorrect. So if we were to go up to here, I'm not sure if I actually got any, but in the notifications table up here, if you drill down into a specific notification to get through to the notifications page, the creation date time was appearing incorrectly. So again, we fixed that, and that's no longer going to be a problem. The next fix is Excel and PDF reports incorrectly show the time in UTC and not in the local time zone. So I think I can show that in action. But if I go to, say, the computers tab and I export the computers list to PDF, so I can show it in the browser. So on the report itself, we would, or rather on the report itself, we state this is all the time shown in UTC. But if I were to change my time zone, so as the CCM admin user, if I go in here and change my selected time zone to something else, let's just pick one and hit save. And if I do that export again, so I'm going to export to PDF here again. It's refreshing. Export to PDF. So this time round for the second instance, although we would say on the report that the times are in Bangladeshi Standard Time, the times themselves wouldn't have been updated to reflect the new time zone. So they're now correctly being updated to show the time zone. So currently that says 21:12:01, but if we go back to the other report that we had, then it's not the right one. That's why I was getting a little bit concerned there. That's still in Bangladeshi. Where's my UTC one? UTC one is there, which is 15:12. And the last check-in time is obviously because I've it's checked in, or no, I read that wrong. Sorry, it is the right time. It's just the hours that are offset. So that's that. Let's close down some of these tabs so I don't confuse myself going forward. The next bug fix was non-administrative users cannot view the login attempt section. So what that's referring to is if I were signed into CCM as a non-administrator user, I wouldn't be able to access this login attempt screen. So for the login attempt screen, it's literally saying, when was the last time that I was attempted to, or my user attempted to be logged in? And as a CCM admin user or someone in that role, I would be able to see this screen, but as a non-administrator user, I wouldn't be able to get into here. So again, that's been fixed. And the final bug is group statistics were not updated when adding computer groups and groups via the API. So you might be wondering, what is a computer group and what is a group? Short answer is you don't need to know. It's an implementation detail in the system. But the important thing here is if I were to look at the groups page, then what we do here is we maintain a account of all the groups that a computer is associated with. And every time a computer reports in, it has the potential for that group to be, or whenever I report in or whenever I change a group setting, it's got the potential for this number here to change. So what we found was that if you did an update via the API, the numbers here weren't being updated to reflect accurately what was going on, and that correction of that data didn't happen until the next time the computer reported in. So long story short, the numbers will now accurately reflect the group membership for a computer, regardless of how said computer or group are being updated. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, feel free to shout out in the questions or the chat, and I will endeavor to read those corrections. So moving down into the improvement section, there was one at the top here that I'm going to hand over to Steph to talk about. And again, I'm going to drive. So I'm going to let Steph tell me what to do.
Right. So back over in CCM, if you click on the computers tab over there in the left, on this main computers page, previously you didn't have access to see what groups a computer was enrolled in, but we have added that information onto this page right here. So now you can see all the groups that the computer is enrolled in right here on the table. It is, if a computer is enrolled with more than 5 groups, then we show the first 5. And then all the rest of them are available in the dropdown that is right here that Gary's showing. And if you are to go into a computer, so if you click on that vagrant one right there, then the group status is also available on the actual page as well. And also by default, we show the first 5 right here. And then there's a nifty view more button that when you click it will show all the groups. And then if you want to, make that go away, you can do that also, in case your computer has a lot of groups associated with it. Now, if you were to go back to the computers page again, this will show slightly different based on how many groups your computer is in. So if you go into that machine 1 group right there, or computer, sorry, then so here it's only enrolled in 2 groups, so we don't have that view more or show less button right there, because we don't need it. And then go back one more time to the computers. The main computers. There you go. You can see this last one. Yeah, machine 10. That one's not in any groups currently. So if we were to go into there, if you're familiar with CCM, then this is how it used to look. So we don't even bother showing the groups because it's not in any. So that's basically the gist of it, though. Hope that information is useful to see there.
Perfect. Thank you very much. The next improvement is really one for a little bit of housekeeping. So the text there, creating a deployment and then clicking cancel without adding steps or saving should remove the deployment entirely. So what this one's referring to is if we click on deployments here, and we take a look at what deployments I currently have in the draft state, I've got 2. So if I go ahead and create a new one, but I don't do anything. So maybe I'm just looking around CCM, I've clicked that button, but I don't actually want to do anything. So I'm not going to add a step. I'm not going to do anything to touch this deployment step. If I hit cancel at this point, I'll get brought back to the deployment screen, and that deployment hasn't actually been created. In the previous version of CCM, it would have created essentially an empty deployment plan here that was ready for population. So it's entirely possible that people are just clicking through, trying to get familiar with the system, and they end up with a deployment plan being created when they didn't actually need to. So they would either have to have gone in here to manually delete it. So now we're just stopping that from happening. But if I do go into a deployment plan to create a new one, and I maybe give it a name, call it test, and I hit save, then if I return to the deployment plan or deployments homepage, I will see that one because I've actually made a conscious effort to start doing the creation of that deployment plan. So that was a small it was a small niggle that it was an implementation detail of how we implemented CCM in the first place, but we've now corrected that going forward. I think I'll hand back to Steph on this one, if that's okay. So add the deployment name to the step details page.
Yeah, so this one again is a small improvement, but I think it's very useful. So maybe if you want to go into a completed deployment, yeah, that one's fine. So this is the main deployment, but if you were to drill down below into a deployment step, we can see where this is implemented. So up the top here, we now have the step name and we also have the plan name underneath it. And this was added just to make it more clear on what plan you're actually viewing, because before it wasn't anywhere on this page. So you could easily get confused if you had more than a couple steps open in different tabs and whatnot. So this just helps clarify a little bit more what plan you're viewing.
Perfect. Next one. Okay. The next one is add visual indicators that editing, adding, removing deployment steps is disabled when the deployment schedule is outdated. So I think Steph was going to talk about this one, but I did what we did, but just before the stream, we created a deployment that was we got itself into this state. So I'm going to click on this outdated scheduled deployment, and I'm going to hand back over to Steph.
So yeah, this page before, it looked pretty similar like this to before. We did have a warning message here, but we did add to this warning message a little bit to make it more clear that this start date time needs modified before any other thing can be done on the deployment plan. So in this case, if you were to try to click on the add step button, it doesn't work. It's actually disabled, so you can't even click it. So your mouse hover doesn't turn into a little hand grabbing icon. If you were to have more than one step, you wouldn't be able to move them around. Basically, everything is disabled, and it's a little more clear now as to what action needs done on this page in order to make everything work. So if you were to change that to, yeah, anytime, yep. So you can see when you did that, oh, you got another error there. But once he did that, everything kind of lit up again. So now you're able to view and edit and do anything else on this page. And that was just making sure that we fixed the initial error first before we went further with modifying the plan. So hopefully that's a little more clear now as to why that's like that, and not confusing to have a button there that you can't do anything with. It looked enabled, so it looked like you could click it but you couldn't click it, so it was a little confusing at first. But
okay,
thank
you very much. Oh, I just moused off the page with an unsaved change, so it's prompting me to save, so I did. So the next one is the addition of the options for the version and for the pre-release flag for a basic deployment. So I'll maybe take this one, mainly because this is a feature that I implemented, so I'm going to talk about it. What was available before in the last version of CCM, there was always the ability to have a basic step or an advanced step, and that was configurable based on permissions within CCM. But before, in a basic step, the only thing that you had the option to do was to select what command you wanted and then what package you wanted to put in place. What we've added now is the ability to specify a specific version. So let's say I wanted version 123 of the BGInfo package, or perhaps I wanted the latest available pre-release version of the BGInfo from my source that I have available on my client machines. You can absolutely now configure those within the basic step. Now you could have done that by going into the advanced deployment step and doing choco install bginfo -- version equals whatever. But that kind of requires knowledge of the Chocolatey command syntax, etc. So we brought some of those, those two additional settings out into the basic step to help guide people down that path without having to need to create the Chocolatey command to make that happen. Now, we have made some slight changes in here in the sense that before, it was possible to write multiple package names in here by using the space key. But hopefully you might hear me typing the space key. You can no longer put anything that's not just a single package name into that box. In the same way that I think there's restrictions on the. No, there's not. We were going to put restrictions on the package version, but then we realized that there was a need for having full semantic versions in that package version. So that one is a free text box, but again, you can't put a space in it because a space doesn't make sense in a version number. So I think that's what, that's what Rain's saying in the chat as well. So yeah, you can't put a space in either of those two boxes anymore, and it's now kind of laser focused on what exactly you can put in there. So that was that feature. If you're going via the API for the creation of a step, you can still input the old format, which was just the command and the package name, but you can put in two formats basically. So you can put in one that's got 4 pieces of information, or you can put in one that's got 2 pieces of information. But the restriction on the not having a space in the package name is enforced for both of them, regardless of which direction or which method you use. Okay, so that was that one. The next one is send email notifications when a scheduled deployment fails to start. I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted by some chat comments. I'm trying to keep up with them, but I will ignore them for now. So this one's a little hard to demonstrate, so I won't be able to show it. But there is a scenario where, let's imagine you've created a deployment plan, you've set up so that there's a number of groups, a number of computers within a group, and then let's imagine a scenario that someone on one of those machines says, well, I no longer want CCM deployments to come down to this machine. That's absolutely something that can be configured on each endpoint, and it's respected within CCM. But what that will mean is that scheduled deployment that I might have created that last week for today, and then in between that time, someone has opted out of that CCM deployment. That deployment plan, when it tries to start that scheduled deployment, it will fail to start it, and that will be reflected within the user interface, and it'll stay in this scheduled and ready section. It'll have a little yellow warning triangle, and you can click into it to find out what went on or why it didn't start. But there was no other notifications that went out to the user about that. So what will happen now is that we will send an email to the user who created that scheduled deployment when it fails to start. So it's basically a way of keeping a track of that deployment, the fact that it failed to start, and informing the user that created it. So that's what that one is. The next one is warn when Chocolatey license is due to expire. Now, as I've been clicking around in CCM, you will have seen this in action, but basically, when you first log into the website, the CCM website, and you're on the dashboard here, if your license is due to expire within the next 90 days, we'll start warning you about it. So that warning is very similar to what you would see at the Chocolatey command line. So again, Chocolatey here is informing you that there is only 7 days left on your license. We're showing that same information that you would get at the command line now within CCM. It's slightly different if you're on a trial. I think I'm right in saying, and Rain, you can maybe correct me in the chat room. For a trial, we'll start warning you in 7 days. So if your trial license is due to expire in the next 7 days, we'll start warning you about it. But if you've got a full license, we start warning you within up to and including 90 days. So that gives you an opportunity to reach out to the sales team, to do that, require back and forth to get the new license, etc. And then you can put it onto your system before your license is expired. The important thing there is that if the license does expire, then getting the new license onto all of your machines becomes harder because you can no longer do it through Chocolatey Central Management. But if you get that new license before the license expires, then you can create a deployment that sends it out to all of those machines before that license does expire. The interesting thing about this is that you can dismiss it. So I can click up here and I can dismiss that warning banner, but it will come back again after 2 days to remind you again that it still needs to be done. So it's a little bit of a nag window, but it's a nag window for your own safety. And we encourage you, if you do see it, to reach out to the support team or more specifically the sales team to get an updated license for your installation. Okay, so going back, I'm going to hand over to Steph for this one, which is remember the specified value for show entries dropdowns on tables.
Great. So good one to show this on might be on the deployments page. If you go to there.
Yeah.
So now the little show 10 drop down right here, whenever you change it to a different value, say 25, doesn't matter which one you, yeah, that's fine. If you had 25, of course, it would show you 25. But if you were to reload this page now, so go ahead and reload or go to a different page and then navigate.
Yeah, I'll click on groups and then navigate back.
Yeah. Go back. Then it will remember what you picked right there. And this is per table. So you can kind of go down and see that one still is showing 10. So just in case you have preference on how many results you see, that will be saved for you now.
And that's a per user setting, correct, Steph? So different users can have different settings, yeah?
Yes. Yeah, it's currently it's just stored as a cookie, so it's not a setting that you can configure you know, site-wide right now. It is per table, but yeah, I still think it's pretty useful.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. Depending on the situation, you might have, depending how you queue up your deployments, you might have 50, 100 deployments all ready to go. So you might want this table to be bigger, where you want your actual in-flight ones, you only have a couple at the time. So you could tailor this to what you're trying to show. So yeah, no, it makes absolute sense. Yeah. Okay. The next one I'm going to leave Steph to talk about as well, but it's the replacement of the loading animation.
Yes.
So,
so if you're on a previous version of CCM, I think it was probably 090, I'm thinking, the loading animation was replaced with a very not pretty icon that was kind of black and just not very appealing. So it was replaced in this version with a whole different if you reload you can see it. So it looks a little bit better now. It's a very small detail, but it was one that was kind of, so I imagine it was probably regarding a few other, but we are glad to make that look better.
Perfect. The next one here, which is require new user passwords to be at least 6 characters. So this was, we did some refactoring a little bit, and this is something that kind of came along for the ride. But if you were to create a new user in the system, either through self-registration or through the management console, you have to have a minimum of 6 characters in the password before. You have to have a minimum of 6 characters in the password now. Previously, you could have had a password that was less than 6 characters. Obviously, from a security standpoint, that's not particularly good. So that's now enforced. If you do have a existing user that has a password that's less than 6 characters, it can stay as that. You can still log in with a password that's less than 6, but when you're creating a new user, you do have to have a new minimum of 6 characters in order to create a user and get access to the system. So, and Ryan's saying on the chat there, this also applies to folks changing their password. Yes, so same thing. So if you're creating a new user or you're editing your password because of reasons, or you're changing your password, you'll have to have a minimum of 6 characters there as well. Thanks for that, Ryan. And then the next one, it's kind of a big one. It's add an option for email two-factor authentication as part of authentication. So this is one that's been asked for via support tickets as well. But what we've got now is if we go over to the administration section and click on settings, what we'll see in the security section is there's now a two-factor login section here, which is disabled by default. But if you go ahead and enable it, then some other options appear. The first one being enable email verification and then allow to remember browser. If you allow this, users can select remember the browser to skip the second time two-factor authentication or two-factor login for the same browser. So I'm going to go ahead and enable both of those and show that in action. But what I will preempt is the reason that there's an enable email verification rather than just being enabled is that in a future version of CCM, we fully intend to have different options in there. So you'll be able to turn on email verification. You'll be able to turn on potentially SMS verification. You'll be able to enable potentially an authenticator app as well as the authentication mechanism for that two-factor. But at the minute in this release, the one that we've shipped is the ability to have an email verification token sent out to you. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save all. And then what I've got set up here is a very stripped down version of an email client here, which is called Papercut. It's a development tool that basically just mimics an SMTP server. So the emails that are going to come out of CCM will come into Papercut rather than being sent out to anywhere. So if I go ahead and log out here, what's going to happen if I log in? So I'm going to log in with my username and password. And not entirely sure where the password went. I thought I typed it. If I go ahead and hit return here, I've obviously typed the wrong password. Let me try that again. Again. There we go. Okay. So having typed in the correct username and password, I'll now get sent out an email. So that email contains the two-factor verification code that I need. So I can go ahead and copy that and I can paste this into here. And then I click submit. And then assuming that that's correct, then I will then be logged into the system as I would have been normally. So the important things there, obviously, if I go ahead and log out again, I'm going to click and then log out. If I log in one more time, I'll get sent another email will come through with a verification code. But if I go in here and I type in just a random code and I hit submit, then obviously at that point, it's going to tell me, well, that's not the right one because it's not the right one. It didn't come from my email. The other one, though, is this button here, this checkbox. If I were to keep that one or check that one and hit submit, then subsequent login attempts, I'd no longer be prompted for the login code because I wouldn't need it anymore because I've said that this browser is essentially a safe browser, so I don't need that two-factor authentication. Now, that is just a cookie in the browser, so if you need to remove that, you absolutely can. But that is two-factor authentication enabled for email sending. So I'm going to click back over here, see where we got to. The next one is uninstalling the Chocolatey Management Web should remove the IIS website and application pool. So what this is referring to is if you go ahead and install the Chocolatey Management Web package, it will do all the work that's necessary for setting up the IIS application pool, setting up the IIS website, putting all the bits in place so that that can run as expected. But then if you uninstalled the Chocolatey Management Web package, the website and the application pool would still be there in IIS. So as good citizens, we have now made it that if you uninstall the Chocolatey Management Web package, we'll remove both of those things and it will be back to the way it was. And the final one here is add additional auditing fields for deployments. There's not much to show on this one, but basically what I'm referring to there is that anytime an action is taken on a deployment plan. So what I mean by that is a user starts the deployment, a user cancels the deployment, a user takes another action on a deployment plan, we're now recording all of that data in the database. And now, currently, none of that information is being surfaced, but future versions of CCM fully intend to use that information for the purposes of creating better reporting within CCM. So we've started the process within CCM of capturing that audit data, and then we'll make use of it in future versions. So with that, I think we've got through all of the things on the release notes, but what I'll do is I'll get back into CCM just in the next second here. That's just a way to run out, so I'm not going to get the code from, I'm going to go back and get a new code because the one I've got will have likely have expired. So I'll just go back to the home page here, hopefully. What I was going to do is, if there's any questions, we've got a few minutes left. So if there's any questions that anyone had, I'm happy to field those. But if not, there's a couple of things I wanted to mention about an upcoming, let's call it unscheduled release of Chocolatey Central Management. But let me just get logged in here so that we can talk about that. I've obviously forgotten the password again. I've got the username right. Let's get logged in there. And let's get the new token that's just come through, which is this one. Let's grab that. Copy, paste. Perfect. Okay, so that's me getting logged in again. I haven't seen any questions come through yet. So I'll maybe just start with a couple of at least known issues that we have. So there is a new release of Chocolatey Central Management due to be shipped today, actually, hot off the press. The reason for that is there's at least a couple of known issues with regard to certain things that we felt was important enough to ship a new bug fix release as soon as possible, effectively. So let me just bring up my internal list of those bugs so that I can go through them. And in the time that's allowed, we'll just rattle through them quickly. And then we'll close out from the stream. Let me just get some things in order here. So the first one is that there's a certain page on here. So if I were to go to the software page here and I were to drill down to an individual piece of software, and then if I attempted to do a export of that report to, I think, Excel, then that will throw an error. That's not what's meant to happen. So if you are seeing that with 0.10.0, that is fixed in the 0.10.1 release. It's just a way to go out the door. So that one will be fixed. There's another one where there was a bug with regard to the recurring deployments, which is really unfortunate because it was kind of one of the highlight features that we were really excited about shipping. And the bug is that if you have got a recurring deployment that has multiple steps contained within it, it will duplicate it correctly, but the subsequent steps within that deployment, i.e. steps 2 and steps 3, they won't be created correctly, and as a result, the subsequent deployments those steps don't run, which was a miss on our part. There's no other way of saying it. But we've fixed that and we've added that into our regression testing now. So that obviously won't happen again. Again, that was a high important issue that we wanted to get out the door and fix as soon as possible. One of the other things was, and this was related to the auditing, the changing to the auditing that we did. One of the API endpoints, if you were querying for a computer, so for example, the get computer for view method, we actually removed an important bit of information that at least one of our customers was using, and that was the creation time of that computer. So we've added that back in again. So that's now available as part of that API method again. So apologies about removing that because that was being used within their internal workflows to do stuff. We've put that back in play. There was a slight, the next one, there was a slight niggle with the two-factor authentication, namely the email settings here for the default from and the default from sender display name. If these were left as default, then the website kind of assumed that you haven't set up your SMTP server, in the sense that almost every SMTP server needs an actual email address here to be the sender. So if you configured this and left it in place with your default values, it was still possible to come into the security section and enable email verification. The end result of that is when you logged out and attempted to log back in again, the email would never get out because those email settings were incorrect or not valid or assumed to be not valid. And the end result of that is, well, you're then essentially locked out with CCM. Now, there's ways of getting around that, and there's ways of fixing that. And we could, if you're in that situation, absolutely reach out to us. But in the next version of 0.10.1 of CCM, you're no longer able to enable email verification if you haven't changed away from the default settings. So this button will actually, or this checkbox will actually be disabled, and you won't be able to click it if you're in a state where you can't send an email. Okay, so that was a fourth bug. And the fifth one, it wasn't so much a bug, but it's maybe not best practice, let's put it that way. So when we do an installation of CCM, we create a default user, which is the CCM admin user. And what you'll find is that user has a chocolatey.io email address. So that would result in emails coming in, and we wanted to not have that happen anymore. So instead, we now change the default email address of that user to not be a non-resolvable email address. So it stops emails coming in to that account. And I think that's it. Excuse me. But I think that's all I had to say. Steph, did you have anything else you wanted to bring up?
No, I think you covered everything really well.
Okay. So the only thing left to say then is if you do have any questions or follow-up ideas, suggestions, definitely feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to take any feedback regarding this. I hope that you enjoy the new features that are now in CCM. I know that it's something that I've been looking forward to, getting those features, especially the recurring deployments and the ability to duplicate deployments. That's something that's been on my personal to-do list or personal radar for a while now. So it's great to see them finally getting shipped. And also, I'm just catching up on some of the chat messages here. Those packages are now available on the Chocolatey license feed. Okay, so James and the team there are saying that if you wanted, you can now get the 0.10.1 packages from the license feed as you would normally. So they're available to you on the feed. So that's a breaking news available right here on the stream. Go and get that if you want. And there's another comment there. I'm the CPO of RRM Software Solution. Who can I contact to integrate with Chocolatey? So the best suggestion there would be to go onto the chocolatey.org website, and there is a contact up at the top here. So you should be able to go about and then contact. And then if you follow through the different options there, that will direct the request to the right team. So I've already done that with no answer. I will. When was that? I apologize. I'm not part of that team, so I can't speak to where they are with that. But I can certainly shine a spotlight on that and get a response for you on that. So or Stevie's volunteering to take that up. So apologies on that. But hopefully Stevie will be able to put the right person in contact with you. So thank you for reaching out. Nice one. Okay, so that's all I've got. The only other thing I wanted to mention was that because this is October and this is the month of Hacktoberfest, we at Chocolatey, within the Chocolatey team, are doing Hacktoberfest events. So we did one, or not we, James and Corey on the team did one 2 days ago on Tuesday. So the idea is that every Tuesday in October, we are going to be doing live streaming sessions where we are looking at how you can contribute to Chocolatey open source. So Corey and James were doing some work on a new license command that we're adding in Chocolatey open source. And I've got a stream coming up where I'm going to be doing something. I don't know what that is yet. I haven't fully decided, but there'll be one every Tuesday in October. Like I say, basically going through, this is how you can contribute. This is the kind of the process to go through. So if you are interested in the Hacktoberfest event, where if you do 4 PRs into open source projects, you can get a reward at the end of it. This is our contribution back to that. So if you haven't done so already, go and check that out. There's information on the website, and the recording will be on Twitch, and you can watch it back on there as well if you want. But for now, that's all I've got. So thank you very much. I hope this has been useful. And yeah, let us know if you have any questions. Thank you very much. Talk to you later.